Spring, 1998, New Orleans. Somewhere in the city, a package is moving through the mail. A parcel shipped down from New York, addressed to an ordinary name at an ordinary house. Inside it, heroin. And the men who sent it expect to get paid. That package never reaches the man it was meant for, because federal agents get to it first. And once they have it in their hands, they do the thing that has ended more empires than any gun ever has. They start listening. They put a wire up on a man named Terrence Williams, and they sit in a room with headphones on, and they listen as he works a problem out loud in his own voice. The men in New York want their money for that product. Terrence has a cheaper idea. He is going to have them taken care of right here in New Orleans, so the debt just disappears. He says it the way a man says something he has said before. Calm, practical, like he is talking about a late invoice. He has no idea anyone is writing it down. That phone call, his own voice, planning a thing he is certain no one will ever hear, is about to cost Terrence Williams his entire life as a free man. A judge is going to hand him a number that almost no human being on earth ever hears attached to their name. And here is the detail to hang on to, because the whole story bends around it. The same thing that buries him, his own words, is the only thing that will ever dig him back out. This is the story of the little brother, the one whose family came to own the sound of an entire city, while he sat in a cell with a sentence built to erase him. This is that story. Start with the family. There are three Williams brothers who matter here. The two older ones are Bryan and Ronald. The world would come to know them as Birdman and Slim, the founders of Cash Money Records. And then there is the youngest, Terrence. For most of his life, that is exactly what he was. Somebody's little brother, the other Williams, the one you had to be from New Orleans to have heard of. And the New Orleans they came up in was not the one on the postcards. You have to actually understand the city in those years to understand the choice these brothers were facing. Strip away the music and the parades and the tourists on Bourbon Street, and what you had by the early 1990s was one of the deadliest cities in the entire country. For a stretch there, New Orleans had one of the highest murder rates in America, year after year. The kind of numbers that made the national news. The kind of numbers that turn a neighborhood into a place people are afraid to drive through after dark. And in the middle of that were the projects, the Magnolia, the Calliope, brick housing developments where a lot of the city's young talent and a lot of the city's young trouble came up side by side, often on the very same block. The legal economy had largely walked out of those neighborhoods. What was left running was the other one, the shadow one, the one that paid in cash and collected in blood. That is the New Orleans the Williams brothers were trying to climb out of. Not the postcard, the other one. And like a lot of families down there, they were looking for any door that would open. For Bryan and Ronald, the door was music. They had an ear and an instinct and a plan. They were going to build a record label out of nothing but New Orleans talent and pure hustle. Local rappers, local bounce, a sound the rest of the country had not figured out how to package yet. But a label, in the beginning, is just a dream with bills attached to it. Studio time costs money. Pressing records costs money. Getting your artists out on tour costs money. And in the early 90s, nobody was lining up to hand three brothers from New Orleans a loan to start a rap company nobody outside the city had ever heard of. So the question hanging over the whole family was a simple, hard one. Where does the money come from? Terrence found the answer the streets of New Orleans had been handing young men for generations: the product. And right there is the fork that splits this entire story in two. At the exact moment his brothers were betting everything on the music, Terrence bet on the street. Same blood, same city, same starting line, two completely different ladders. He went all the way in. On the street, the quiet little brother turned into something else, and the streets gave him a name for it: gangsta. By every account, including his own, he earned it. He moved heroin. He ran with a crew of men who did not play. And he carried himself like someone who had already decided exactly how far he was willing to go, and had stopped being afraid of the answer. He would name that crew himself years later. Dooney, Sterling, Mosquito, and him. 4 men out of the New Orleans streets. He said all 3 of the others are gone now. That is its own quiet detail. Of the 4 original members, the only one still breathing is the one who got buried alive by the courts. They called themselves the Hot Boys. Hold on to that name. It is about to become one of the most famous names in the history of hip-hop, and it came straight off the corner Terrence Williams was standing on. Now, here is where the 2 ladders touch, and here is where I have to be straight with you, because that is the whole point of this channel. The story that has trailed Cash Money Records for 30 years is that some of the first money came from Terrence, from the street. The figure people always repeat is $100,000. That number is a rumor. I am not going to dress it up as anything else. The court records that exist do not pin it down, and Terrence himself disputed parts of the story over the years. So when you hear $100,000, hear it the way you would hear anything passed hand to hand on the street. Could be true, never proven. Here is what is not rumor. What is in the sworn record is that Terrence had no legitimate job, that he bought cars in other people's names, and that he talked about putting a substantial amount of cash into a recording company. A man with no legal income talking about investing in a label. That part is documented. The street just filled in the blank with a number, but the money is not even the strongest thread between Terrence and Cash Money. The name is. When Bryan needed a name for a new group, 4 young artists he was about to turn loose on the world, the name came straight off his little brother's crew. By Terrence's own account, he handed it to him. The Hot Boys. And you need to understand how big that group actually got, because that is what makes the split screen so brutal. The Hot Boys were juvenile, B.G. Young Turk, and the youngest of them, a teenager at the time, a kid named Lil Wayne. In 1997, they came together, and within a couple of years, they were not a local act anymore. Juvenile dropped an album that went multi-platinum and put a New Orleans accent in every car radio in the country. The label signed a distribution deal with Universal worth tens of millions of dollars. The bling era, the jewelry, the tanks, the whole look, the rest of hip-hop would spend the next decade copying. A lot of it started right there. That is what the name became. A platinum machine, a culture. And the name came from a street crew run by a man who, at that very moment, was about to be buried under the prison. So picture the split screen, because this is the heart of the whole thing. On one side, the Hot Boys are kids on magazine covers, platinum plaques on the wall, money everywhere, making the city proud. On the other side, the original Hot Boy, the man the name came from, is out in the street getting pulled into the deal that is about to swallow him whole. That is the package in the mail. That is the wire on the phone. That is his own voice, calm and practical, planning to have the New York men taken care of so a debt would disappear. And the thing about a wiretap is that there is no beating it. You can stare down a witness, you can out-lawyer a snitch. You cannot argue with a recording of your own voice, played back in a federal courtroom, laying out the plan in your own words. In 1998, Terrence Williams pleaded guilty, continuing criminal enterprise, and solicitation for murder. And on June the 24th, 1999, the judge read out the number: life in prison plus 240 years. Sit with that for 1 second, because it is built to do something specific. You cannot serve 240 years. Nobody can. It is not really a sentence at all. It is a message. It says you are finished. It says you will grow old in here and you will die in here, and the word outside is never coming back to your life. They did not just want him locked up, they wanted him erased. He was in his 20s when he heard it. And from there, the two lives split clean in half. On one side, cash money detonated. Lil Wayne, the youngest hot boy, the teenager, grew up to become one of the best-selling artists who ever picked up a microphone. A man some people will argue is among the greatest rappers of all time. Birdman became one of the wealthiest figures in all of hip-hop. A man who moved more money through a single music video than most people will see in their entire lives. The empire that his little brother's crew had named just kept climbing, year after year after year. On the other side, Terrence sat in a federal cell, moved from prison to prison, under a sentence with no bottom to it. Think about what those 2 decades actually were for him. Every year, the music his brothers built got bigger. New stars, new hits. Lil Wayne going from the teenage hot boy to a global superstar. Drake and Nicki Minaj eventually signing to the same label, selling tens of millions more. The Williams name becoming one of the biggest in the entire industry. And Terrence watched all of it from the inside. The little brother, the one who took the other ladder, buried under the exact city his brothers were now sitting on top of, listening to the empire his crew had named grow louder every single year, knowing he was never supposed to hear the outside again. For more than 20 years, that was the whole story. 2 brothers in the clouds, 1 brother in the ground. And then in January of 2022, something happened that almost never happens. Terrence Williams walked out. A free man, 47 years old. A man with life plus 240 years does not just come home. That door does not swing open by good behavior or by waiting long enough. So the moment he stepped out of that prison, one question tore through New Orleans, and it has never fully gone away. How? And the judge would not say. The reasons for his release were sealed, locked away from the public, struck from the open record. And there is really only one kind of situation where that happens, where a man with a no-bottom sentence gets quietly resentenced down to time served, and the court buries the reasons why. It happens when the man gives them something. Now go all the way back to the start. The thing that put Terrence in that cell was his own voice on a wire, his own words, and the thing that finally got him out was the exact same thing. Because the public records point straight at it. Terrence filed his own paperwork asking for a reduction. In it, he said he had valuable, irrefutable information about murders. He wrote directly to the authorities. He offered to testify to help close cases that had gone cold for years. He named names. And here is the part that turns it from a claim into something real. And I want to be clear, this part is reported, drawn from his own affidavits and from the newspaper, not something I am asking you to take on faith. Nearly 2 years after he handed over that information, police made an arrest in a cold case killing from the 1990s, a murder that had sat unsolved for over a decade. According to the documents, that was one of the exact cases Terrence had laid out for the government. The information was good. The man with the impossible sentence had the one thing the system wanted badly enough to crack open a door that was supposed to stay shut forever. So he spent it. The same man who earned the name Gangsta, who lived by the street code his entire adult life. And the first commandment of that code, the one carved over everything else, is that you never, ever talk. He got to the very end of his options in that cell, and he did the math one last time. The same cold, practical math you heard in his voice on that wire all those years before. The only currency he had left was information, the one thing he was never, ever supposed to give up. He gave it up, and it brought him home. He came back to a world that had moved on without him. The brothers he left behind as up-and-coming label owners were now industry royalty. The teenager from his crew's namesake group was now one of the most famous artists alive. 23 years had gone by, and the man who walked back into New Orleans at 47 carried a question on his back that the streets do not forgive, the question of exactly what he said and about whom to buy his way out. So what do you take from the life of Terrence Williams? Take the fork. 3 brothers, 1 city, 1 brutal version of the same choice New Orleans had been putting in front of its young men for generations. The music or the street, the slow climb or the fast money. Bryan and Ronald took the slow climb, and it carried them further than anybody from their block could have dreamed. A billion-dollar empire. The sound of a generation. Terrence took the fast money, and the fast money took everything. His 20s, his 30s, most of his 40s, a whole life traded for a number with no bottom. His brothers' names are on the records. His crew's name is on the most famous group the label ever had. And his own name, in the end, ended up on an affidavit that helped close a murder case and unlocked a cell that was never supposed to open. Same blood, same city, same starting line. One brother became a billionaire, and the little brother, the original hot boy, the one everybody had written off forever, got buried by his own words, and then 23 years later, dug himself out with them.